Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe and
I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are talking about week 4 of the Canadian Premier League. We are going to look at a couple of derbies that went on so far. We had the Salish Sea Derby between Pacific FC and between Vancouver FC. We had the 905 Derby between York United and between Forge, and as well as some other interesting matches. We had some really nice goals, some red cards, some penalty decisions, lots of drama, lots of contention. So lots to talk about in this week's episode. But before we dive into it, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on YouTube under the same name to see the visual side of the podcast. Now we're going to start with the Friday night game. This was between Valour and Halifax. This was Valour's home opener of the season. Had to wait till week 4. Better than waiting till week 9. Whatever it was last season. But they did have to face the high-flying Halifax Wanderers, who came into this undefeated in their first 3 weeks. Unfortunately for Valour, that would continue for Halifax as they won this match 1-0 in the end with a late goal from Vitor Dias for Halifax. Each game so far for Halifax, let's start talking about Halifax, and then we can, I'll let you rant about Valour if you'd like. Each of the matches so far for Halifax, they've scored past the 80th minute. So they have a knack right now to score late goals. It seems like they really have that desire to keep pushing all the way to the end. And specifically with this one, what really helped them out were the substitutions. It felt like the first 60 or so minutes, both teams, but I think Halifax more so, kind of struggled to set a rhythm, struggled to really get into it. There wasn't as much combination play. I think, credit to Valour. Valour were making it a bit more difficult for Halifax to do that. I think Halifax at times in the attack were a little flat. But then they brought in some changes, including Vitor Dias and including Thiago Coimbra. And it was them two that really kind of lit the spark for Halifax, because they, even before they linked up for the goal, which was really nice, kind of little combination play between the two. They had a chance earlier in the match as well, around I think it was the 78th minute, where Vitor Dias kind of like dinked the ball in behind for Thiago Coimbra to try to slide through, slide and shoot in behind, but his shot just went wide. But it showed that they had a nice little connection, obviously both being Brazilian players, a little bit of that Brazilian flair to the team. And in the end, it's what got them the goal. What did you think, Mike, of how Halifax played and how subs changed the game?
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. They seem to have a little bit more of an understanding of what they're doing in different phases of play over these last couple of years of Patrice Geyser. The first year seemed very energetic, and sometimes those teams would drop off towards the end of games because of the amount of effort that was put in. Last year, there's a lot of changes, and I don't think there's been times where he hasn't really trusted the players on the bench quite as much. Young players they've been coming in late in the season, haven't been given those chances. But this year, he seems to have worked out what the players seem to understand their roles. And if Dias and Coimbra are going to be sort of finishers rather than starters, like if they look like they've got that kind of combination worked out now, it's these players will come in. You've got Bai coming in for and on the wing later on in the games. You've got for Bahambula, you've got difference makers on the pitch which are seem to be lined up to keep the intensity and to keep things going, so they can just continue through till late on in games. And they haven't had that before under Patrice. And now they seem to have worked out how to manage games so much better, and the way there seems to be set up. Yeah, the game wasn't going their way at all, and credit to Valour for that. But Halifax worked out what they've got different strengths now, and that can keep them going throughout that 90 minutes. It isn't just hell for leather. Let's try and go for it.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that if you look at the players that came off, and Ryan Telfer, and then I think it was Giorgio Probo and Bahambula. I think those were the three subs that came off. Giorgio Probo has had a fantastic season so far.
Yeah.
And he had a slow game, but then you still have Vitor Dias that can come off the bench and provide that added spark. Same thing with Ryan Telfer. Ryan Telfer has been good for Halifax so far. I scored a goal already.
Yeah.
But, you still have somebody off the bench that can make an impact if he isn't, being as effective on that particular day. And that's a strength that Halifax have now that I think we saw a bit in the first season. We didn't see enough of it in the second season, but so far in this third season, the Patrice guys we're starting to see it come to fruition a little bit more. And I think it's a huge asset for Halifax moving forward, because not everyone's going to be a 10 out of 10 all the time. Not everyone's even going to put up a 7 out of 10 all the time. So if there are players that are having off days, if you have good options off the bench that can be effective, well, that's how you continue to win games. Even in games where you don't look like the better side, if you can still win it because of the game changers you have on the bench, well, that's what makes a championship side. That's how Forge and Cavalry have been able to dominate the CPL.
Yeah.
The last 6 seasons is even when they have an off day, they have players either off the bench or on the pitch that can just flip a switch and get the win and victory and all 3 points for them. And then in the end, that's what Halifax did. But the attack is one thing, but also I got to commend Halifax for their defense, because that was their first clean sheet of the season. And, Valour didn't score, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. They had a lot of dangerous crosses going into the box, a lot of opportunities that they were trying to create, whether people were there or not. We can talk about that when we talk about Valour. But, Adam Perlman and TMG, especially Adam Perlman, I think had really, really good matches. The Perlman just won everything in the ball in the air every time that the ball went into the box. Yeah, he basically won everything. TMG was the leader that we expected him to be, and we had questions about Patrice Geyser sticking with the back three defensively. Was it going to be as disastrous at times as it was last season? And so far, so good. I mean, yes, they had to wait until the 4th week to get a clean sheet, but nevertheless, they were able to get one. And now hopefully that gives the defense a little bit of momentum. But yeah, I've been really impressed by the way that the back three has been able to come together. And especially this game, I think it was the best game defensively that we've seen from Halifax all season.
Yeah, no, they're playing very well at the moment, and yeah, seem to be growing in confidence, don't they? With Yesley in goal behind them, looks very confident as well. It's a much better way of setting up than it was at the beginning of last year. They seem to be a little bit more flexible, not quite as rigid as the 3-5-2 kind of style. Immediately pushed up, and it made it hard for Fowler, who I thought were still really good. Like they really did improve week on week. They were making it difficult for Halifax to a degree throughout this game. Their wide players are so important, and when it is that back three, like you've got sort of Fernandez and Twadek on one side has been fantastic, and Faria's really stepped up quite a lot as well. The issue is once it gets into the box, because they haven't got the runners at the moment. Hundel's there. He's kind of isolated in the box a little bit too often. Obviously, you got Javi was there at first. Rizal had played behind him the game before. When the ball's out wide, they whip it in, and if it's Twadek crossing, Faria comes in. If it's the other way around, the other comes in. But the runners from midfield weren't coming. So when it's so wide heavy, and they have got great partnerships, I think, like their wide midfielder and fullback is on both sides is really good, but their two central midfielders are very defensive. And it wasn't until they brought on Mla, who got a brilliant chance in the 85th minute, but he was making those breaks, and obviously you're chasing the game a little bit more at that point. But if they are going to be playing in these crosses from the wings, they need to work out a way of getting more runners into the box at times, because when you've got 3 defenders and they're playing against three forwards, and then you add in those 2 midfielders who have dropped in to help, you're always massively outnumbered.
Yeah, it did feel like they were missing just that like crash the box midfielder, that kind of late run into the box, because you have, like you said, these wide players that are so important for the team, and the fact that they're overlapping and they're combining together to find and create space, you get these deliveries into the box that are good deliveries. I mean, Chris Twardek showed last season with Ottawa that he can cross a ball in. Temi Antonoglu, probably the best creative left back in the league. We've raved on about him for 12 months or so already in terms of his delivery. So it's not like you're lacking quality in the crosses that you're putting in. You're just lacking numbers in the box. And I think part of the reason is because they need a midfielder, a Frank Lampard-esque midfielder that has a kind of that sense of when to arrive late into the box to take advantage of those cutbacks or those chip crosses towards the back post. But the other side of it is, I don't think Sean Hundal is doing enough as a striker right now to make it at least uncomfortable for the defense. Granted, he is one center back against a back 3, so it is very tough for him to make an entire defense uncomfortable. But it never really felt like the back line was ever panicking when the cross came in. Hondal was kind of a little bit too passive. I feel like he needs to work a little bit harder to at least make it difficult for them to clear it. Because if they have a bad clearance, somebody can take advantage. Boom, you might have a half a chance. But it just felt like he was a little bit pedestrian at times. He works hard, I feel like, when he's on the ball and maybe when the ball's in front of him. But when the ball is coming into the air, he needs to do a little bit more physically to challenge for that ball, because I feel like he needs to be a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah, I think he's more dangerous when they're getting to the byline, they're cutting back crosses. He's not wanting the ones that are just tossed in and he's got to fight with a defender to win the header. And they've got, if they're obviously not going to make big changes, they obviously can't, but until the next window. So they need to start trying to find ways of trying to get to the byline and cut it back, because that's where the chance came when Fourier got to the end and played the cross. Kind of how that overhead kick pass from Twardek to the goal last week came. When they get into those positions, they can be a bit more dangerous, and it gives those other players a bit more chance to get in. And that's kind of what Hundal wants. Like, he doesn't want to be fighting. He wants to find a space and get a cutback and first time shot. And he's the striker they've got, whether that's whether that's right in the long term or not. In the short term, that's what they got. And they need to think of how they can try and get more out of him, because tossing the ball in the box, I don't think it's working too well.
No, it isn't. But I do think that, maybe some of the difficulties in creating that space out wide is that with the back 3, it's easier for one of the center backs to go out and cover that space out wide. I think Valour just need to play a little bit quicker to have those overlaps to be able to get to the byline, because, unless Caligari or Isaiah Johnson drops into the back 4 or Timoteo makes it back from the other side, you do have that opportunity to overlap because it's only one center back. And, Bahambula, who was the right midfielder, isn't going to come back and defend at lightning pace. So the opportunity was there, and we saw, like you mentioned, we saw it at the end. They just need to do it a little bit quicker and a little bit more consistently. But hopefully for Valour, that'll come with time. One more thing I wanted to chat about before we moved on to the next game, though, is we did see 2 simulation yellow cards in this match from the referee. And I mean, the first one was definitely a dive. Second one, maybe a little bit more contentious. But the referee, Fabrizio Stasola, I really like the consistency that he had with it. And you look at both both opportunities, and they're both very dramatic flops. But most of the time, you see referees especially for the second one, it rolled out for a goal kick. Most of the time, you're not going to call for simulation. You're just going to let it go for a goal kick. It's just not give the penalty. But he went out of his way and gave yellow cards for both of them, and I think rightfully dives. I really am enjoying that the referees, or seemingly it's starting, maybe this is the standard and we can have a conversation about this, that the referees are starting to be a little bit more strict about simulation, because let's be honest, most referees in most leagues aren't really that strict. And this was the first time where I saw, wait a minute, he's actually calling dives.
Yeah, it was really great. Like, they deserve their praise when they get things right, because we're quick to jump on them when they get it wrong. So it is nice to be able to have that chance. Like, hopefully, I thought he refereed this game really well. This is like a really good performance all round, as well as picking those two out. I think he refereed the game very well. Still not perfect in the league, obviously. It's probably never going to be perfect. It's not perfect anywhere. So there'll be ups and downs throughout, but it's nice to see that happening, and hopefully some other referees will get a bit of confidence from it, from watching their colleague doing that and thinking, actually, like he's keeping up with the play. He's seen it. He's been confident with the call, and they accepted it. I mean, there's going to be some protest, but I think like Xavi especially just wandered off like, yeah, you got me.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like players know, and they don't really complain. And that's about the thing is, like, when a player doesn't complain, usually you can tell that the referee got it right.
Definitely.
And that's something that we'll talk about in this next game.
Yes.
Between Cavalry and Ottawa. This is the first of the Saturday game, and a lot of action in this.
This is where the games just start getting weirder.
Yes. It felt, you know what, you're right. It felt like the Friday game. It was 1-0. There wasn't that much action. It was kind of like a standard, normal game. And then you just get, as the weekend goes on, and
then Saturday
listeners will see.
Then Saturday started. Night.
And then something was in the air in the CPL to just allow weird things to happen, for people to see red, yada yada yada. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting weekend from Saturday onwards. But let's start with this Cavalry against Ottawa game. Ottawa did win this match 3-1 as a final score, but if you watched the match from the beginning, you'd be surprised to see that was the final score, because in the first half, honestly, for the first 50-60 minutes, I would argue that Cavalry were the strongest side of the two. They were creating a lot of chances in the first half, a lot of really good chances in the first half, especially Ali Musi, Camargo, Toby Warchowski. There was a lot of chances where they you would almost bet on any other day that they would score, but they didn't in this one. And it gave a little bit. It was better than the Vancouver FC game, because in the Vancouver FC game, for the first half, they were just asleep. They were just walking shocked. At least in this one, they were sharper in their passing play, and they were more attacking, but they couldn't get it in the back of the net. And credit to where credit's due. That's thanks to Nathan Ingham.
Yeah.
What a stellar performance from the keeper. A magnificent save on Sergio Camargo, right in front of goal, right in the 6-yard line.
Yeah.
Scoops it away with his foot.
Yeah.
He dives the wrong way, but his foot's there and manages to just clear it off before it rolls into the back of the net. So obviously, keeper, kudos. He's a big reason why Cavalry wasn't leading going into the drama of the last 30 or 35 minutes. But it still didn't feel like Cavalry were firing in all cylinders in the way that they were, at the end of last season. And I feel like this is just a continuation of the trend with Cavalry, that they take a little while to warm up at the start of seasons. And then, the first third maybe isn't, vintage Cavalry. But then by the second third and the final third, there's where you start to see Cavalry really get into their element. Is it just a case of that again for Cavalry this season?
It seems like it, because like you say, in that first half, they were the better team. But a lot of the time you see them playing, and you don't think, well, this will probably still be 0-0 at half time. They're creating chances, but they always create some chances. It's just they're not. The players aren't clinical at the beginning of the season. Like it's just each week it's slowly moving up, like you say, and the performance is apart from that Vancouver one, it's not like they're playing terribly. It's that they're putting things together and things are starting to look encouraging, but at the same time, it's like, well, it's been encouraging. Now do something more. Like now make it good. Like, and yeah, we thought, like you say, you bring up that Nathan Ing stop. I mean, that was 2 minutes into the second half, and you think, okay, right, Cavalry are actually going to get started now, and they're actually coming out. They've had that first half of starting to feel the game out, starting to just get on top, and now they're going to push on. But obviously really didn't. Absolute chaos.
Yes. No, it looked like Cavalry were just waiting for an opportunity for luck to strike. And in the end, it was the exact opposite. They had a very unfortunate turn of events in multiple ways. So let's start with the first one, which was the goal. Very odd goal. The ball went wide to Gabriel Antonoro, and Antonoro did what I think a winger would always want to do in that kind of scenario, which is just in the corner of the box, is try to, curl across into the danger area. And he did do that. And then somehow the ball went not into the box, but into the back of the net. And Marco Carducci was left flummoxed, trying to dive way too late as Antonoro scored a random goal. And at first look, I was very confused. I was like, what the heck just happened?
Everyone was on the viewing.
Even looking back on the replay, I think it has gone down as a deflection. Like an own goal on Camden for a deflection. But even looking back on it, I didn't see it take a touch, or maybe it was a very, very slight touch. It might have just been the camera angle on the replay that I saw. But I was confused because I didn't know if it actually took a deflection or if just Carducci read it so wrong. But it just completely sucked the emotion and just the noise and everything out of Atco Field as that ball went in. Except for the Ottawa players, it was surreal how that ball went in.
Just crazy. Yeah, like you say, Carducci's obviously going, sees it moving back. It's not going with any pace whatsoever, but his whole body, like the body weight's gone one way, and he can't recover. And just watch it go again. It was just completely. Just how you say, there's no words. It just completely silenced everyone. It sucked all the energy out, and they were just like, "What on earth? This is ridiculous."
Yep. And I think if you look at that, you'd say unlucky from Cavalry, to go down like that. But you still back Cavalry to now, okay, switch on, be able to go get an equalizer the same way that they did against Vancouver. But no, because just a few minutes later as well, they get another massive setback in a red card. Because for some reason, I don't know what Kozlowski and Camden were chatting about on that corner kick. But on the corner kick, Camden decides to just full-on sideswipe Kozlowski's arm. Just an aggressive action. Is it enough for a man to fall to his knees, fall on the flip-flop on the ground and everything? Absolutely not. But this is football. We know what it is. The referee gets, I guess, a look at it. I don't know if it was the assistant referee that gave the advice, but as soon as that happens, obviously everyone gets annoyed. Everyone gets pissed off. Handbags come out. There's a big kerfuffle in the box. And then the referee takes Camden and then shows him a red card. And my first reaction when I saw that red card was, ooh, that's harsh. They're going to be angry about that. It is an aggressive action. It is silly from Camden. But I feel like in the spirit of the game, you'd give that as a strong yellow and say, Camden, if you step any out of line again, if you show any other aggression, I'll send you off then. Because he only like lashed out at his arm. If it was a headbutt, of course. If it was something, if it was like a punch to the face, of course. But because it was kind of just like a swipe / smack, I didn't think it was that bad. But then you look at Camden,
Yeah, I
and he
think it's
has no
maybe
reaction.
less because to me, when I was watching it, it looked like he was just trying to do as hard as he could a massive whack to the crotch. Like, so it was aggressive. There was
No, for
feeling
sure.
in that. So,
I'm not denying that, and I don't think even even if we had VAR, I don't think VAR, if it looked at that, would overturn it because it was an
no,
aggressive
yeah, I
action.
was, yeah, I was
I,
with
I
you.
just was a little surprised that it was a quick straight red like that. But the fact that Bradley Camden's reaction was just a turn away and walk straight into the
Yeah,
locker
he
room
knew what he
made me
did.
feel like maybe it was rougher than I initially thought, because
Yeah,
he has zero complaints.
no,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, just
and just like that, Cavalry are a goal down and a man down in the space of, what was it, like 5 minutes?
mm,
It was
yeah,
brutal
5 minutes. Yeah,
for Cavalry there. And as soon as that happened, Ottawa smelled blood in the water, and easy as you like for them for the second goal. A nice little combo goal on the counter between David Rodriguez, the man of the moment right now for Ottawa,
mm,
and Balou Tabla. And, Balou Tabla finally gets a goal
yeah.
after opportunity and opportunity. Really good finish. Finally, that's, showcasing the quality that we know that he has. And 2-0 up with a man up, it kind of felt inevitable for Ottawa to take that
Yeah.
win. And you can't help but feel sorry for Cavalry.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's their own doing. Because as soon as that happened, like you say, Ottawa just had a fun little time. Like they were just enjoying it. Then ran away with it. They've got players who can beat. They know that Cavalry are trying to push for something, and as soon as they lose the ball, they've got the players to go past them. And I mean, like obviously, you mentioned before we got started, the young players that have come into this team, like getting that opportunity to play against 10 men as well was very helpful. A lot of young players in this squad, and you can see like there's a few that I'm sure you want to mention, but it's on the back. Antonoro again, he got his goal. I thought he's now got a bit more of a chance. When he first broke into the team a while back, I was excited to see what might happen with him, whether he could make a go of it in this team, or whether he could become like a useful like regular player, a regular young player. And I think he's starting to really show that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are. I mean, we'll talk about some of the young players um, that Ottawa have, but the confidence that David Mejia has right now in the young players is frankly really surprising. Especially
Mm.
as coach coming in, you would expect, as a coach just coming in, you rely on the experience and wait to give the youngsters a chance after the team is sort of settled. But no, David Mejia. I mean, last week he had a fantastic performance from Noah Batna. He unfortunately got injured; he wasn't able to start. So what did he do? He started 18-year-old Kozlovsky alongside who was it, Tier Walker, I think it was, or
I'm trying to
forget
think.
I
Yeah,
forget exactly who it was, but it was another young center back that played alongside them. It
Cloutier,
was
Cloutier.
Cloutier, that's what it was.
Mm.
So Cloutier, it was the pairing between Cloutier and Kozlovsky, 18-year-old. I think Cloutier is 20 or 21.
Yeah, I think so.
Uh,
Yeah.
and Amir Didic. And again, you would think Amir Didic, he would be the one that starts in the center because that's one of the most important. No, Mejia says, Didic, you're on the right. Why? Because I want you as a ball playing defender. So Cloutier in the center, Kozlovsky
Mm.
on the left, 18 and 20 years old. And they played a really good match.
Yeah.
Obviously Cavalry had a lot of chances. So had it been a different day, maybe it wouldn't have been great. But they held their own. They stayed sharp and played, especially after, the whole kerfuffle that happened. They stayed focused. They didn't get hot headed or anything. And they helped Ottawa be able to see out the 3 points. And like you talked about, Antonoro having a really good match. And then you have the youngster, I think Joaquin Coulange, that came off the bench at just 18 years old and managed to get the third for Ottawa. And a little bit fortunate, a little bit of a mistake at the back, ball kind of bouncing around between two defenders. One defender goes that way, left, the other defender goes that way, right, and then the ball just drops in the middle away from both of them, and Coulange just takes it and slides it between Carducci's legs. Fortunate, but a fantastic moment for him. His first goal in the CPL at just 18 years old. Usually an 18-year-old scoring a goal, you'd be like, wow, that's a really young age to score a goal. For the CPL, we've seen 16-year-olds score goals, so maybe he's 2 years too late for that title. But yeah, fantastic moment for him. And then, speaking of mistakes, the third goal also, I wanted to ask for you your opinion on what happened, because it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere for Cavalry. I don't know if Ottawa just sort of fell asleep, but Musi does a little ball roll, like not even a ball roll. He does like a little Maradona in the middle of the pitch, and then just slides Kaniga Elvin in behind, and Elva scores. And it was so out of nowhere that Adam Jenkins was doing an ad read or like a promotional read in the middle of it. It was like, wait a minute, they just scored. It was it just kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. I was curious your thoughts on what happened there.
Yeah, it was all very much Ottawa just like, well, it's 3-0 when they did that, like the whistle's coming. Like there was very little. The intensity levels obviously dropped off a lot, and all of a sudden, a Cavalry player just I forget who played the ball through there. The turn. Sorry.
Musi.
Yeah. All of a sudden, just thinks, "I'll sod it. Like I've got the talent. I'm just I'm gonna try something. Like because why not at that point?" And I think it just caught Ottawa a bit sort of unaware, thinking that Cavalry were just going to just play for time, just like, oh, can we just get this over with?
Yeah. I'm sure David Mejia won't be happy with that because he would have wanted the clean sheet. But I mean, 3 points is 3 points, especially away from home to Cavalry, who are the regular season champions. It's a massive, massive result for Ottawa. And when you look at the way that they've started the season, it's been really good. I mean, they're one of the top teams for a reason, and the way that they've been able to play. The interesting thing for me is that even though they've got 3 wins and 1 draw, same as Halifax, it still doesn't feel like this is the final version of Ottawa or like the best version. You look at the game before against York United, they had to wait until they went a goal down before they woke up and started to play better. In this one, they could have easily been 1 or 2 goals down had Cavalry been a little bit more clinical. They've shown in moments that they can be one of the best teams in the league. But overall, in terms of performances across 90 minutes, they're still a work in progress. So I think Mejia will be very happy that even though they're a work in progress, they're still getting the results and getting these early points on the board.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ottawa, I think some of that is, like you mentioned, is trust in those young players. So they're not going to fill you immediately with a whole lot of confidence. So they'll show you promise more than like, oh, there you go, there's a reliable player for the rest of the year. I mean, they're already on 974 minutes, only behind the CPL's crash, Vancouver FC. It's like no other team is playing young players and performing so well. Vancouver, who we'll talk about next, and Pacific are below them, but everyone else is less than half of the number of minutes that Ottawa have given to young players from the start. And that's why, maybe we get that feeling, okay, well, it's not exactly what we expect as a final, sort of like the final edition of Ottawa, but like you said, they're still getting those points.
Yeah, they are. They're still getting those points, and if this is them now, I'm only,
Mm.
imagining what it'll be like when they actually get to their sort of final form, especially if these young players keep showing up and get more confidence,
Yeah.
get more experience, and grow more throughout the season. All in all, very good to be an Ottawa fan right now. Because unless something dramatic happens, unless the ghost of Cargo Past comes through, it seems like it's going to be a very competitive season
Yeah.
from Ottawa in 2025. But you mentioned the two BC teams, so let's move on to the two BC teams facing off against each other in the Salish Sea Derby. It finished 1-1 between Vancouver and Pacific. And fun fact, it is the first time since Vancouver FC joined the league that the Salish Sea Derby ends in a draw. Every other game, there has been a victor between the two sides. This is the first time that we get split honors between the two BC sides. And let's talk about the home side, Vancouver FC. It was another game that I was there for, and a different press box. They moved the press box to a different area. Yeah, which was kind of nice. It was a better view
Yeah, that was
than the original one, so that's nice. I got to give credit where credit's due. That was a nice
good.
little change
Yeah.
from Vancouver FC, and seemed to be, maybe a precursor for things to come with the game,
Yeah.
because slight improvements all
Mm.
around from Vancouver FC. They started the game really well.
Yeah.
I think they looked a lot more organized. Their press was really good. I know we talked about it last week. And it was that press in the end that allowed them to take advantage of a mistake from Pacific. A really poor clearance from the Pacific's back line fell to Terran Campbell, who was able to thread in behind Nicolas Mesquita to score his second of the season.
Mm.
And it's again that combination of Mesquita and Campbell. Everyone was talking about Guido Diaz and Campbell being the dangerous pair. Apparently, it's Campbell and Mesquita that are the dangerous pair as they link up for a second consecutive match to score yet another goal between them. So maybe that's a partnership to look out, looking overall. But yeah, I think with Vancouver FC, I'm surprised in how
Mm.
well that they've been able to kind of collect themselves after such a poor opening two matches to the season.
Yeah, and I think for most other teams, I'd have complete egg on my face after calling them trash no less than 2 weeks ago. But with Vancouver, it could all fall off a cliff at any moment. So I'm holding out whether to give a full apology. Yeah, but it is so much better. It's night and day compared to those last couple, those opening games of the season. Yeah, like you say, they are pushing on. I mean, it was a gift. That terrible pass. That was it, Mercado.
Yeah, I think it was Mikado.
It was just woeful. They weren't pressing per se in that moment, but because their bodies are up the pitch, they're ready to take advantage of that. Quickly, it's not like they've been slow and there's gaps all over the field. They are actually in a position to actually attack and make something of that mistake, which was really good. Yeah, just looked so much a better side. They've got these young players coming in, but they have got a decent enough starting 11 with quite a bit of experience. But you got Fotzing playing really well, who's sort of made himself comfortable in that team really quickly. Asusi still 24, but yeah, that midfield is young and inexperienced and getting to know the new teammates and performing well. They seem to have got a little. Pacific didn't give them too much to worry about at times to a degree, but I don't want to take too much away from Vancouver because they did look comfortable, and that's got to be encouraging for Afshin Gotby that they are looking like they're each week looking a little bit better and getting a good understanding of what their role is.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is that I think they're just starting to do the simple stuff better now in terms of the way that they're playing and the way that they're transitioning into their attacking formation and transitioning back into the defensive formation. Just looks a bit more structured. Seems like everyone understands their roles a little bit clearer. You mentioned Fotzing looking comfortable. I think he was a player, until he had to be taken off for a specific reason. He was a player that I have been continuously impressed by. A lot of people are saying he's the next Grady McDonald, and I was like, yeah, okay, but maybe he is, maybe even more than Grady McDonald, which would be great for them in their long-term vision. But even players like Mateo Campagna, I think he was really solid as a center back, just helping, with David Norman to organize the defense. He's really come into his own, I think, in the last couple of matches as the starting center back alongside, David Norman. You even look at like Elijah Baugh, and he was starting on the left hand of a back four. He was a left back, but he was still attacking and overlapping, going into that sort of 3-4-3, and being a threat in the same way that he has been in the first few seasons. He's been one of the most consistent sparks for Vancouver FC since match week 1, even if sometimes his decision, like his passes, his final actions haven't been as clean. At least he's trying to create some stuff. But I've been really impressed by the way that Vancouver FC have played. And to be fair to them, this is them without a lot of those international players that they had been talking about. We saw one of the debuts of Juan Batista in the match, and he was pretty good. The ball likes to stick at his feet. He can dribble past some players. Obviously, he was brought in a difficult situation. But he as soon as he gets integrated, he might add something different to Vancouver FC. They're still waiting on, I think, 3 more international players to get their clearances and get into the club. So for a team without a lot of that extra firepower, whether it comes good or bad, that remains to be seen. But for a team still missing those kind of question marks, not too bad. I mean, undefeated in 2 matches, if you look at it that way. Yeah. Winless in 4, but undefeated in 2. Depends on whether you see the glass half empty or half full. Exactly. But yeah, it did kind of, you did mention, it did kind of feel like it was a bit easier for them because in 45 minutes, Pacific really didn't do much.
No.
It was the issue that Pacific has been having. I mean, throughout the beginning of this season, throughout last season, you could say the season before, for a while.
Yeah.
Of not having really that much goal threat in their attack.
It was worrying. Yeah, there's just because it's really hard because we want to praise some of those Vancouver players in the first half. With defensive players, you want to say they look good, they look settled, but they just weren't tested. There's nowhere near as much as they will against 4 or 5 other teams in this league.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about that when that comes to be, when they start facing the likes of Forge and Cavalry, Ottawa, yada yada. But it's just confusing because you look at Pacific's attack, and they brought back Barco Bustos, and they have Ronan Krat, who seems like he scored a hell of a goal to announce himself and seemed like a dangerous player. You even have Dario Zanata, who is being able to get in on the goals, and has been a more consistent goal threat since the end of last season and going into this season. But yet they still are struggling to do much. And I think, yet again, that kind of comes down to the lack of a proper number 9. You look at
all of it. Like, look at that. Crack goes down the line the 80th minute and plays the ball into the box. You're a man up. There's 10 minutes left, and you're chasing the game. Like, you want to get something out of this. You need to get something out of this out of your rival. He plays the ball in. There's one Pacific player, in the box. It's just how are you going to score goals if you're just going to be watching 1 or 2 players trying to beat 6 or 7 defenders? Because Vancouver are deep. Like, you can sit there, you can push up into get close to entering the final third, but then they just stop, and they're watching the 2 or 3 players in front to see if they'll score a goal, or we'll just bang it from range. Like, there's no runners, there's no movement, and it's so worrying, like for the team, like where they go from here, because I mean, you stick a number 9 in there, he's on his own. Like it's like that's the big issue for me. Like for me, I don't think it's so much the striker. It's just the fact that it's the whole team is so cautious. They don't want to, like, they won't commit. They won't move numbers. You won't have runners. We talked about Valour not having that midfielder that's running, and Sean Young's not making those runs anymore. Like, this has been like a year now, and Sean Young isn't a box-to-box midfielder anymore. He's just a centre mid, and he's like, and it's really frustrating to watch because like some of it's really nice football, and then it just stops, and they're not too sure. They're not too keen on going that little extra.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, it goes farther away, or it goes more than just with the striker. I wonder if it's worth it for James Merriman, because it's been such a long-standing issue, to just hire an attacking coach. Just bring in a coach that their whole focus is on getting the forwards to be more dangerous, and maybe be like, we need this kind of forward. Because, I'm not saying that James Merriman can't do that and he has a shortage in his coaching, but just an added asset, because for it to be an issue, like Pacific have been struggling to score goals for multiple seasons now. There has to be something that they can do to kind of better that, because aside that defensively, they've shown that they can be really good.
Yeah,
they have talent in the midfield. It's only when they go from past the halfway line where they start to kind of deteriorate a bit. It's honestly like a very mind-boggling thing for me to see them struggle so hard with that, especially with a lifeline that they were given.
Yeah,
because let's talk about the biggest turning point in the
could lay down the Luke. Oh, hey guys, do you want to come to my new place? Come on,
Yeah.
come on, old friends, come on over.
Bang! Take that.
What on earth happened?
I have no idea. So in the 51st minute, if you didn't see it, there was a foul on, I think it was Mosquita, by Sean Young.
Yeah.
It was a foul. It was a little bit of a nasty foul, probably a yellow card, but nothing much. The whistle blew. The foul was called. That's an important detail. The foul was already called. It wasn't like they were waiting for it. The foul was immediately called. And Sean Young has turned away. He knows he's guilty. He's been a bad boy.
And he's still, I mean, he has still like gone to close down that like half-heartedly, and the two of them have bumped a little bit.
Yeah. Because they kind of ran into each other. But then Tana Luke just loses his head, shoves Sean Young basically around the upper body neck area with a lot of force. And obviously Sean Young flops backwards, and it's a red card. Like, I've seen people complain that that's not a red card. People shove each other all the time. Yeah,
but
people shove each other all the time. But like, that wasn't just a shove. That was like he threw his whole body into that. And I think looking at it, like it's like it was around the neck area, so close to the head. And it was an aggressive action from out of nowhere.
Yeah. Absolutely bizarre.
Yes, maybe it's not everywhere it's a red card, but you give the ref the opportunity to give you a red card.
Yeah, I think that's a red everywhere. Like, that's just, you can't do it. You're not allowed. Whether you like, you raise your hands, you shove someone, you're usually going to get sent off. Like,
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with these kinds of decisions. And like, he just saw red. It was like red mist. And the confusing part is that Dadaluke and Sean Young are boys. Like, they have good history together. They were ex-teammates. They were good friends. Their partners were good friends. Like, these are boys. These are buddies. What happened that allowed that to happen? I don't know if Dadaluke forgot it was Sean Young and was just frustrated in general, or knew it was Sean Young and took it out. I don't want to guess on
It's the
the
old,
personal lives behind the
it's the
players,
old
but
Materazzi Zidane thing where Materazzi were like, "I'll never say what I said."
genuinely. And you know what? That's what's funny. Afshin Gopi mentioned it afterwards. He's like, and he used that exact example. Said, I have to see if something was said for Kunle to have that reaction, because usually Kunle is like one of the most nice, composed
Yeah.
kind of player. So it was very odd to see him like that. We'll see what happens. If anything comes of it in the weeks to come, heal or to try to get some evidence. But either way, it was an absolutely just stunning decision from Luke to do that. And then the referee gave him a red card, and then immediately the whole scope of the match changed in that instant, because now Pacific had the extra man, and they began to push, and they began to push. And again, credit to Vancouver, they were able to withstand it. Pacific, the way that they were creating or creating chances, it wasn't quick enough for me. They weren't really taking all that much advantage of the man down. Obviously, they took advantage in terms of possession, but in terms of actually getting into the final third, I didn't think it was quick enough for them to actually be able to create more dangerous opportunities. It did create some dangerous opportunities. You talk about the I think it was Josh Hurd that had a chance. I think it was in stoppage time. Had a free
Yeah, the
volley
back, just free volley, like
and just sends it over. I mean, that was the opportunity to score
solid.
the winning goal.
Yeah,
But they had other opportunities as well before that I can't quite remember.
but
But
they weren't great chances. I mean,
no,
Ndong gets up, good header, like
you're right, from the
really
corner.
well taken. Great to get the equaliser, and you think push on, but like I don't want to rehash what I've just said about them, like with the crap chant things like that. They're too cautious, and they don't. Yeah, like you're playing against 10 men. Like
Mhm.
at least put more like put yourself out there a bit more.
Mm, yeah.
You're like someone who's gone to a nightclub and they're just waiting for someone to come and hit on them rather than go
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
it.
gotta take a little bit of courage. You gotta want it a little bit
Yeah.
more. I get you. Yeah. No, and I feel like with Pacific, it is a wasted opportunity. I mean, against your rivals, away from home, against 10 men, you gotta win that game. I think
Yeah.
if I'm Pacific, you have to know that you have to win that game, especially considering how well the other teams are doing. And the fact, yeah, it's very, very early in the season. We're only 4 match days in. But now you're 6 points behind the league leaders in
Yeah.
Ottawa and Halifax.
And you're playing the same
And
as you have for the last year and a bit.
yeah. And it, at the beginning of the season, we thought Pacific was going to be one of the strongest teams in the league just based on their recruitment. But this attacking issue continues to be an issue for them. And it makes me worried about what the rest of the season will look like for them if they just can't start banging in the goals. Maybe they just need one game. They need one game where everything comes together. They can score 3 goals, win 3-0, and then kind of continue that on throughout the season. Maybe
Yeah.
that's all I need. We'll see if that happens, though. We'll
Yeah.
see if that happens. I would say definitely don't hold your breath for that. But you never know. You never know. Now let's talk about the 4th and final game, which was
Are we only going to do like half the time on this one, because that seems to be what the two teams did for this match as
yeah.
well? Yeah.
Yes, that is true. This was we're talking about the 905 derby between York United and Forge FC. It finished 2-2 in what was a very exciting affair. Unfortunately for fans, all of the action happened in the first 45 minutes
Great
of the
first half.
match.
Really.
Fantastic first half. In fact, all 4 goals were scored in a 17-minute window. Flying first half from the two teams. And it seemed that they were very satisfied with what they did in the first half.
Yeah, we put on a show. That'll do.
Barely anything happened in the second half. So let's spend most of the time talking about the first half. And let's talk about the home side in York United, because even though they conceded first, they were really impressive in that game, especially since they conceded first against Forge FC. A lot of other teams, you would expect them to maybe, kind of drop their heads a bit, struggle to get back into the game. Forge, use that momentum, boom, go get a second, and then it's game over.
Yeah.
No. After the kind of mess of that first goal, where I think was it Borges that pulled the ball across into the box, kind of bundled past everyone, and then fell to Razart Rama
who
twice.
Took it on the third or fourth
it was
legs
a very
everywhere.
messy goal. Yeah, limbs everywhere. Very messy goal. But Razart Rama gets his first goal after his return to Forge FC. Nice little moment for him.
Yeah.
But York, they just get back to it and they keep putting the pressure on. They keep attacking, and within minutes, they get their equalizer, and it's Riley Ferrazzo with an absolute stunning goal from about 25 yards out. That's textbook CPL. That's the textbook CPL bangers only, trademark goal. Just thumps it from like 25 yards out, maybe into the top right corner.
Definitely not across.
Definitely not across. Yeah, he can claim that he meant that one. He definitely can claim that he meant that one. It was an absolute golazo for him, and really highlights how much he's come into his own. What I really like about Mauro Eustáquio is the way that his, wing backs have been able to get into the game, and how threatening they are. Because Ferrazzo obviously gets the plaudits because of the goal, and last week he got the assist for Abadne's goal as well. But also Max Ferrari. I've really been impressed by the work rate of Max Ferrari. I mean, he's always been a workhorse for York United, but I feel like he's been able to have a more simplistic role to just run down the line. And it's allowed Gabby Batar, who's on the right side too, to kind of float in and drift into those half spaces, which is where he does his best work. And the way that allows them to kind of move the defense around of their opposition makes them a more dangerous team. And you look at this, Forge kind of fell asleep after scoring. Ferrazzo should have never had that much space, way too much space between the defense and the midfield and the attack. But it's part also because of the way that York were playing, and they were drawing out the defense on that right side, giving a lot of space for Ferrazzo to kind of take advantage of the left side. And just the movement that they're able to do with the wing backs, and then the two wingers that kind of either usually kind of cut inside to become almost center forwards. The movement between those, 4 or 5 players have been really impressive for York so far, and we're really on display in the first half.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not foolproof by any means, obviously, but the way that those two sort of floating forwards around the striker that's Altobelli in this one, they sort of try and occupy a fullback, then drag them in at times, and then the fullback's like, do I pass him on to the centre back because the wing backs, and so they're moving those players around, and they're finding space for either themselves to receive the ball, and if the defender goes with them, then all of a sudden Ferrazzo or Ferrari have got space and they can receive out wide, and so they're moving defenders well. It works great against sides, especially that maybe their wingers aren't as defensive minded as others. Look at Mo Babuli, good going forward. Don't really trust him in defence, and they probably won't more for giving away the penalty as well, wasn't it, Babuli? So they've got those opportunities, but there's obviously the risk. Like, that's why they concede the goals as well. Like, you are bombing forward and you are causing issues, but Forge and other teams have got quality in transition and things like that. So it makes it really fun to watch as a neutral. I'm really, really enjoying your comics. I'm hoping it carries on. I'm looking forward to July when I get to actually go and see them. So it'll be good if they're playing this kind of football still.
Yeah, hopefully they are, and hopefully Julian Altobelli keeps banging in the goals as he has been so far this season, because he proved pivotal once again, getting York in front after a few minutes where there was the penalty call inside the box. Originally, there was a handball that everyone was talking about, and then later, Gabby Batar, literally seconds later, kept playing, tried to dribble past 3 players. I forget who. I think it was Jabarpour, was it? Or
I think it was a big mix. Babuli trips him.
it was Babuli that kind of did the back leg and tripped him. Yeah, and got the penalty. And then Altobelli steps up, a kind of stutter step penalty, which I'm always a little bit hesitant to see because sometimes it backfires. A really good penalty. Scores his 4th goal in as many games. He's on a 1 goal per game, ratio right now, which insane for a player just coming into the league. And as young as he is, hopefully he keeps going at it because he's actually a really good example of what a striker in terms of the movement that he does should do when you're facing, some of the biggest and best center backs in the league. Even beforehand, he was still sort of dangerous. In the lead up to the penalty, he was causing problems for Forge's defense. Something that we talked about earlier with Sean Hundle, something he should do more. Altobelli has been doing really well for York. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see how York continue to improve. But then it was Forge that got back onto it thanks to another penalty. Kind of a harsh handball.
Yeah. I guess his hand's not in the natural area.
It was like this.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
not
also
like
jumping.
Yeah,
Like
just
you could
if
say,
he went in a bit more committed, but he seemed to be a little bit
yeah, a little
like
bit
trying to get
unsure.
through lines. And yeah, those ones are just really unfortunate. Like they're gonna get called, but yeah, it's just an unfortunate one for them.
Yeah. And then up steps Brian Wright. And credit to Brian Wright. A really good penalty. He
Really
usually I was listening to Adam Jenkins. His penalties aren't usually that great in terms of picking corners.
Yeah.
He just slightly goes either side. But this one, he thumped it in the top of the corner. But before then, he had a really good opportunity with a ball in behind. And he just fumbled the touch and wasn't able to put it away. And once again, is that of like, you got to do better there. If you're going to play for one of the best teams, if not the best team in the CPL, and you're going to be the starting striker, you got to put those away. Thankfully for him, he spared his blushes by scoring the penalty. If he would have missed that, oh my God. You wouldn't have heard the end of it. But still, for me, Brian Wright, is he the one to take Forge to the next level at the starting striker spot? Not particularly. I still wasn't convinced, and I think you're probably the same.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, he's a nice enough player, but he's just a decent CPL striker. He's not a top CPL striker.
Yeah. And when he was like that for York, I think he got away with it more. Now that he's playing for Forge, he's a lot more in spotlight, and there's a lot more expectation, especially with the kind of purple patch that he had for York United last season. You expect him to try to replicate that as soon as possible. And so far, he hasn't.
No.
So hopefully for him, he does. But as of right now, I'm not all that convinced. And then for the second half, only one talking point. The only talking point was that Oswaldo Leon off a corner could have won it at the very end at the back post.
Yeah.
But but he just sent it over the crossbar. So it could have been York 3-2.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was York 2-2. And that was about it for the second half. It was very, very mundane, pedestrian second half from the two sides. But what that does show is how much York have improved.
Yeah.
Since, a couple seasons ago with Forge. Maybe they're starting to actually level out a bit, at least so far, based on performance, because in the same way that Cavalry didn't have a bad match against Ottawa, Forge didn't have a bad match against York. It wasn't like this was Forge having a bad game in the way that they have been able to have in the past. This was just York were level with them. York stepped up and, were at the same quality of performance as Forge, and they struggled, Forge, to really do much else. The defensive structure from York, what they were able to do in possession, it caused problems for Forge. And by the end, they were relatively even in possession. They had the same amount of shots on target. They only had one less big chance. They had 16, twice as many shots to Forge's shots of just 8. Again, they had the same amount of shots on target, so the quality of it. But still, it was a level affair. Draw was actually a good reflection of how the game went. And for York, they don't have great records against Forge FC in recent times. So for them, a 2-2 draw, it's showing, hey, maybe you are getting better and getting to the level where you can, upset Forge on a day where they aren't playing badly. Because Forge can have a bad day and York can take advantage.
Yeah.
But this one was like, no, they almost took advantage.
Yeah, we've seen when they won the goal from Samaro, goes and wins it, and like different things like that. But this one, they went behind as well, and they fought back. They just look like a team that believes in what they're doing much more than like that did improve last year, but towards the end of the season, it seemed to tail off a little bit. Obviously, still made playoffs and still played well, but wasn't quite as strong as it was for like when the change first started. And it's night and day from Martin Nash. Like there was no thoughts, there was no like set plan in that. And we didn't know what to expect from him. Like we said, like beginning of the year, like this is Eustachius' chance, but he's got a whole new. He's changed a lot. He's kept a few players, but then the way that they looked like they're going to be set up was going to be very different. Maybe not set up, but the way they were going to play their sort of system. And it's really interesting because they did look like a really strong side. They still have the same record as Pacific, who can't score. So it's one of those weird sort of feelings of like we're still getting to know exactly what they are. But it shows so much more promise than a lot of the teams below them, and quite rightly in 4th place. I think for me, like being there, they're a strong team looking to push on rather than a team at the top who's got lucky or a team at the bottom who's just playing bad.
Yeah. And even though they lost the 2 matches before, this was still an improvement. And you can still see some of the identity that they're starting to form in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest part, is that you can have bad games, even bad runs, but as long as you see something in the play, you can see what they're trying to accomplish, and you can see it coming good, then it's still a positive trend. And I think that's what York United are in. They're still, I think, in a positive trend. They just need to fix a couple of things here and there. But
yeah, there's going to be bits throughout, like you say. They'll have to fix as they go. But they're a new team, and it's a new look for them. And you always want to be thinking, oh, I can see where things are going, rather than I don't know what's happening here. We'll see what happens. We'll see which version turns up next week.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm excited to see how York continue as the weeks come on. But that is it for the match day review, but not it for the episode. We're going to quickly chat about the Canadian Championship because, hooray, it starts this week. We got 3 matches on the docket for this week, 4 matches next week, which we'll talk about after next week's episode. But let's start with the first 3 matches. Today, at the time of recording, which is Tuesday, there are 2 matches. There is Ottawa against Scrosopi. I think it is. I always see it written. I never see it pronounced. So apologies if that's not it. Scrosopi. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Then we have Cavalry against Edmonton Scottish at 6 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Eastern. And tomorrow we have the big one. Toronto against CF Montreal. One of the big MLS boys are going out in the first round, and that's at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Now, the first 2 matches, Ottawa against Scrosopi and Cavalry against the Edmonton Scottish. Do you really see the opportunity for any upsets in this one? Because I love a good cup set. But maybe, and granted, I don't know much about either teams. I don't really follow League One in Ontario or League One in Alberta. I only follow League One in BC. So this might be my ignorance showing, but I don't really see any cup sets happening in the first two matches. I think Cavalry and Ottawa will go through.
Yeah, it'll be really surprising. See because you need to see a big level of quality from two sides, which I know nothing of, obviously, as well. But they're coming up against two really tough teams as well. It's not like these are two teams that are poor. It's not like two teams who have started off terribly. Cavalry may not have the points on the board, but they've looked good, like we said. In some situations, you think against the League One side, they convert a couple more of those chances, and Ottawa are flying. Unless they turn up like Cavalry did against Vancouver to like twice the degree of that. Like they've got the quality, obviously, so like that they could really they'll feel. And like you mentioned there, obviously we're talking about Toronto and Montreal, but one of those MLS teams is going out early, and you know that straight away. So for all these CPL teams, it's like, okay, well, we might only have to beat one of them. So there's a little bit more of that sort of in that mindset starting out from the beginning of it, going that one of the MLS teams is gone, and now we can put in a push for this.
Exactly, and I think that'll be and the added motivation for them to get them across the line. But then the interesting one is, of course, Toronto against Montreal, because you talk about form. And whoo boy, for those that don't follow the MLS, there's one Canadian team that is the best in the West and the East, and that is my beloved Vancouver Whitecaps. And then there are two teams that are lounging at the bottom of the respective conference, and that is, of course, Toronto FC and Montreal. Montreal don't have a single win this season in MLS. They obviously fired their coach, Laurent Courtois. After I think it was 4 or 5 matches so far, Toronto FC have been able to get a win. The first win season. They got one.
Give them that. That's 20 matches of 1 win combined for these two sides.
20 matches, 1 win. It's not looking good for the both.
Credit to Toronto. So I'm gonna I watch MLS not quite as much, nowhere near as much as CPL. But Toronto have scored twice as many goals as Montreal with a whopping 8. So my money's on Toronto because 4 goals in 10 games doesn't fill me with a whole lot of confidence in there.
Yeah. Though, the Canadian Classico is, form goes out the window, is what they say in derby matches.
Maybe they'll both be good then.
All right, let's flip and hope so, because if they're both as bad as they'd be playing before, goodness gracious, that's going to be a snore fest. But I agree. I think I'm going to edge it towards Toronto just because they've been a little bit better than Montreal. But yeah, they got a combined 12 goals. All I'm saying is the Whitecaps have 20 goals. So I don't think there's going to be much competition there so far.
And they're playing CONCACAF. It's not like they're juggling all this as well.
Yeah, exactly. But those are the first 3 matches of the Canadian Championship. We will talk about them after they finish, likely at the end of next week's episode. So tune in for that one. But for this week's episode, that's all we have for you. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC. So let us know your thoughts on this week's episode and maybe what your own predictions are for the Canadian Championship. But until next time, I'm Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Ross.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.